In the 14th century, Jews migrated en masse to Poland, which then controlled parts of the Ukraine and Lithuania.
First major Polish king, Kazimierz the Great, invites Jews to come to live in Poland to help to develop the country economically. He gives them very, very good conditions of life. He gives them tax breaks. He gives them all kinds of rights, which perhaps normally the Catholic Church would not want them to have. And that attracts a lot of Jews eastward. What also attracts the Jews eastward is the fact that Jews are thrown out of England in 1290, they're thrown out of France in 1306 for the first time, and out of France for the last time in 1394. There are all kinds of anti-Jewish attacks and blood libels and all kinds of other libels and massacres throughout Germany in the 14th century, so that the survivors run eastward, where anti-Semitism perhaps is not as deeply embedded yet in the population.
For 3 centuries, Poland's Jews enjoyed a respite from the relentless persecution that racked neighboring lands. They referred optimistically to their host country by the Hebrew po-lin, meaning, "we shall rest here," hoping that the tranquility would continue until the Messiah would arrive to lead them back to their homeland. Safety and financial stability translated into a spiritual blossoming. Poland became the epicenter of Ashkenazic Jewry, with an exceptional pious norm. In one of his works, 17th century mystic Rabbi Nosson Hanover describes the climax of their spiritual climb.
Every Jewish community maintained a yeshiva. Every community had young students whom they supported with a weekly stipend so they could study. There was scarcely a house in all of Poland where the Torah was not studied.
In the 16th century, the Szlachta, the Polish nobility, puts the Jews to work many Jews to work in a very special enterprise. They conquer the Ukraine and take over all kinds of very large estates, and Jews are appointed to run the estates for the Szlachta. Now, the Ukraine, as opposed to the rest of Poland, is not Catholic. The Ukraine is Greek Orthodox. The Ukrainians see the Poles as not only as overlords and as oppressors who squeeze them for money, they also see them as heretics.
In 1648, a savage man by the name of Bogdan Chmelnytsky led the Ukrainian Cossacks in an uprising against the ruling Polish nobility in a bid for independence. Chmelnytsky diverted much of his war effort to a genocidal purge of the region's Jews. As agents of the Polish nobility, the Jews collected the taxes that the non-Jewish residents owed to the Polish landlords. This had provided many Jews with financial security, but it now resulted in great suffering.
The Jewish community suffers tremendous damage. The leadership is wiped out, communities are laid low, Jews are murdered wholesale, and the Jewish community is dealt a blow from which it never will recover.
The survivors suffered exceptional trauma. Families struggled to earn a livelihood, and only a minority could afford their children a Torah education. Soon, a social rift emerged between the few scholars and the overwhelming majority of largely ignorant, impoverished Jews. This fissure only served to deepen the national trauma. Into this gloom, there stepped a man bearing tidings of salvation. It happened in 1665.
There appeared in the city of Smyrna in Turkey, in the Ottoman Empire at the time, a man named Shabtai Tzvi, a greatly charismatic, learned individual who declared himself to be the Messiah. He started a movement which spread like wildfire. There's a famous Jewish woman whose name was Glickel of Hameln, which is in Germany. She describes how her father packed his bags, sold his business, sat there waiting with his packed bags, waiting for the Messiah to reveal himself. The word came to Poland, and none other than Rabbi David Halevi, who was known in rabbinic circles as the author of one of the major commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, sent his son and someone else to go check out Shabtai Tzvi to see if it's possible that this is really the real thing. There were people who objected, there were people who warned, especially there was a rabbi in Amsterdam whose name was Rabbi Sasportas, who screamed and yelled that this guy's a fraud, but nobody wanted to listen to him.
Reasons for concern rapidly mounted as Shabtai grew increasingly erratic. His devotees attributed this to a superior state, but others recognized that he was mentally unstable. Modern scholars believe that he suffered from bipolar disorder. He introduced blatant violations of Torah law. Since the Messiah has arrived, he explained, matters previously forbidden are now permitted. One man who was particularly unimpressed with Shabtai was the Ottoman ruler Sultan Mehmed IV, who jailed the pseudo-Messiah as a revolutionary in February 1666. 7 months later, the Sultan gave him a choice of Islam or death. Shabtai chose Islam, and Jews worldwide reeled in disbelief.
The intensity of the anticipation that this was the Mashiach was so high that as high as the heights were of anticipation, so were the depths of disappointment among many, many Jews within the world. And the blow was just incalculable.
The Jews of Poland felt doubly abandoned. The new despair dashed their hopes for healing into the blood-soaked reality of post-massacre Poland, compounding hopelessness with suffering and social imbalance with spiritual crisis. A leadership vacuum ensued, and unworthy rabbis took advantage of the chaos and purchased or rented the title rabbi from the local nobles. These rabbis downplayed prayer and sincere spiritual growth. They focused on exhibiting their keen, analytic abilities, hoping to become widely known. Pay-to-play rabbis were not the role models and guides the struggling communities required at this fragile time. And by ripping the heart out of the daily prayers, these rabbis tore the soul out of a meaningful dialogue with God, just when the people needed it most. Despite a number of positive developments in Poland, even after 1648, Polish Jewry was in an overall material and spiritual decline. Many God-fearing Torah scholars struggled to survive. Unable and unwilling to bribe their way into rabbinical posts, they could also not rely on their impoverished brethren to hire them as teachers. Rather than fraternize with the unlearned masses, many such scholars embraced asceticism, studying, fasting, and praying in seclusion from their communities. Such individuals, who would normally have served as genuine role models, became unavailable to the community. Moreover, their overly ascetic lifestyles made them melancholic, deepening the national gloom. By the beginning of the 18th century, Jewry was spiritually lethargic, perhaps even comatose. This was the dismal scene into which Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov entered and began to spread his teachings.